The Conservatives are fighting back on immigration against reform, and they're fighting back against immigration on Labour. And so last night I was sent the embargoed deportation bill. And what's funny is, obviously, normally you have a bill when you're in government.
Yes.
There you are.
Well, I mean,
think of immigration, let's do a bill. But no, they're going to put a deportation bill, which is not their bill, in Parliament now, and they released it last night, embargo till 10 o'clock.
Can't help but think that any point in the last 14 years when they were in government would have been the opportune time to put this forward, rather than just after they had left government.
No.
Yeah.
Don't apply logic to the application.
The campaign going, man.
Yeah, they keep it going. But, it is fascinating. They've come out, they recognise how badly they've done in last week's election with reform. They can see that they're now in fourth and fifth place in several parts of the country. This is really beginning to worry even the lefties within the Conservative Party, or rather the Liberal Democrats, whatever we call.
Well, you say even the lefties in the Conservative parties, as if there is any other type of Conservative.
Yeah. No, I will say I have met several who actually are generally on our side of the line. Right. Some have been converted to our line over time when they started off. I mean, Liz Truss was really, she was leader of the Lib Dems in Oxford, and now I wouldn't dare say that she just doesn't believe in what we're doing. Suella Braverman definitely believes in what we're doing. And I think to be fair to Robert, who about a couple of times, I was very, very doubtful about him. And I think he's having some sort of Damascene conversion. Because there are those within the Conservative Party who recognise that they've been wrecked since the end of the 70s, the destruction of getting rid of Thatcher and the ideology that allowed the Heseltines and that growth of the EU supporting side to come through, emphasised by Cameron, who then flooded the kind of process of Conservative MPs with people like Caroline Noakes, who were perfectly happy being in the Green Party, quite frankly, or the Labour, or any party there she could be getting power. It's definitely not a Conservative. And so this is where they are, with a smaller bunch of Conservatives in there looking over at the Lib Dems on one side and Reform on the other. And this is a moment where the Conservatives recognise this is the possible death knell of them. 200 years of history. So they've got to come out fighting.
Well, they've managed to carve out a space, which is, they kept on tacking to what they perceive to be the centre, but the centre is to the left anyway.
Yeah.
And then they're being flanked on the right. So basically, they've got this tiny central slither.
Yeah.
That's their support base. What's the point of them?
That is the point. And that's where they're now facing this, and the donors are telling them, the activists are telling them that there's just no appetite on the street for them. Last night I was talking to a kind of dyed-in-the-wool a Conservative who said, I will never vote for Reform, a business person. And in the local elections she said, I did. I voted for him because the guy was a businessman. He knows what we're doing in here. And the Liberal Democrat was just weedy. I said, well, there's nothing strange about that, to be honest.
Probably wear sandals.
The Greens were in there, but unfortunately the Liberal Democrat won in that particular part of Winchester. They will do. But that, even to someone that I knew like that, who could never possibly vote for Farage's lot, and she apoplectic about Farage, can't stand it. She said, I'd love to have somebody who was not Farage running an authentic kind of populist right-wing party with conservative policies, if it's just not Farage and that lot in Reform. But I voted for
that story you told. That was for the Winchester candidate, wasn't it?
That's one of the Winchester seats that were coming up.
Do you know who the former Winchester candidate for Reform was? It was me.
Was it?
Yes. But I got chucked out because I promoted a policy which later appeared on page 3 of the Reform Manifesto.
Right.
But because I'd got there earlier than Farage, that was unacceptable.
Welcome to the club. Something before Farage got it, and then he wants to kick you out.
So I got
now in the Rupert Club as well.
Yeah, so. I got booted out about a year out, or maybe a bit less than a year out from the election. So that must be whoever replaced me.
Okay. All right. Well, I've not met him. Don't know anything about him. Just passing on the comments that the people learn. It's just intriguing to say that slither is there you're talking about. And it's becoming more and more palpable across the country. Where would the donors want to vote? And we're seeing donations coming in. So they're coming to try and fight back. Now, to be fair on them, no one can draft up a bill like this just on the back of last week. It would have to be in the process.
Yes.
So what I've done is I'll go through it just to say it was there. They've put in some big headlines. We're looking at disapplying the Human Rights Act from all immigration-related matters, doubling the residency requirements for indefinite leave to remain, new powers to revoke indefinite leave to remain. All good, legally binding voted annual cap on migration. Again, interesting how Theresa May, Cameron have looked at that before. Tighter visa rules for partners and civil partners. I want to see the full lines on this because that's a really important part. If you want to control immigration, you've virtually got to stop partners and civil partners from coming in and their families as well.
Yeah.
Visa sanctions from cooperative countries. Welcome to Trumpland. Again, I talk about that later. Power to deport all foreign criminals. That's a nice little loophole. Interesting.
That was the thing that got me kicked out of Reform. That
line?
Suggesting that, yeah.
Okay. One that they still haven't yet enacted, or have they actually put that in their policy?
Well, they put it on page 3 of the manifesto, but
okay.
You just can't get there too quickly.
No, not at all. Interesting one that I have to admit I missed this. I don't know whether I'd seen it. Is removing GDPR protections from foreign criminals and illegal migrants from weaponizing privacy laws to dodge deportations. It's not an area of research that's come across. I've not seen it in any cases. I don't know how many or how big a factor it is, but it seems to be really relevant for them to want to put it into a deportation bill. And then, of course, the one that we've always been crying out for a long time is mandatory scientific age testing. So for children.
Oh, that will end the beautiful memes, though, of people who turn up and claiming to be 13 and they've got, 14, wrinkles.
Beard like mine.
Yeah. About to retire to Mirpur.
Yeah.
Just once they got the pension. That's it.
I'm less convinced by the GDPR protections, though, because, I mean, the myriad of human rights lawyers will just find some other angle, and then that will be the thing.
Well, I think that's one of the points I think we can have a quick chat about. I love the Chris Phelps line there. It's for months the Labour government has turned a blind eye to the crisis at our borders. As small boats crossings have increased to over 12,000 now. I think we're looking at.
Are we forgetting the Boris wave?
Yeah. Legal immigration on Boris and illegal on that. So they then go on to a few notes for editors. And of course, where we go, what's the reactions so far? This is the Independent. Tories to publish deportation bill as party hits out at Labour and Reform. I was looking for it. Where they're going to be the big leftist argument, how awful and evil these people are. Nope. Quite balanced. Just actually saying what's in the paper.
Interesting.
The Sun came across. Tory migrant plan unveils deportation bill with sweeping curbs on both legal and illegal. So I'm looking there, is there going to be some massive right-wing Sun newspaper, get them out, deport. Nope. Just completely balanced when you read through it.
Wow.
The first element was the use of the word by the Daily Express, radical plan. For deportation bill emerges in a bid to end the crisis and they picked the binding annual cap. Well, I particularly don't understand why. That's not one of the most important parts in there. And then they run down through that. So I would have thought the benefits claim is much more important. And so, again, fairly muted across the press.
You're not surely suggesting that the establishment is closing ranks to try and protect, a key element of the establishment, are you?
It might well be. Or I was thinking, is it because they just don't care? Are they just turn around and say? Are they turn around and going, "Oh, well, it's just the Tories"?
It's like when a small dog acts viciously.
Yeah,
like you just don't really care.
You're sat there, and your neighbour's little chihuahua is trying to bite your ankle off, and when they're not looking, you just stop it. Honestly, I have never done that. Dog lovers, look at me. That's a joke, by the way.
No, but if the Conservative Party was a small dog, it would be right to be.
So last night, I kind of put out some kind of looking through them to try and a brief analysis for people. So for the centre, the bill disapplies the Human Rights Act from all immigration matters. I know they like to say migration, but actually the law is immigration. We don't have migration acts, it's immigration acts. And so what they're trying to say is that on the panoply of immigration, you've got immigration law, you've got immigration policy and procedure. So you have these huge packs of immigration policies and procedures that go into the Home Office, and you've got Home Office guidelines. So this is to disapply the Human Rights Act across the whole swathe of that. Fine. On paper, I would say, whoopee, brilliant. I'd love it. Bring it on. Only problem is that I have as an immigration lawyer is that all of the Human Rights Act is already embedded in our common law, and it's secured by our membership of the European Court of Human Rights. And the three factors that enable judges to make these decisions are the ECHR, the HR, and the common law, which has embedded the decisions of the judges in previous immigration cases. You remove one of the three tiers, the two tiers still stand. So you're going to get the opportunity for immigration lawyers to say, fine, thanks very much, Tories, even if this was to come into law, we can still carry on.
I also suspect a large amount of it doesn't even require the legal element of this. I mean, I'll give you an example. Back in my VC days, I had calls to work with an Indian CEO we were doing something with, and we needed him to come and visit the UK for a period of about 3 weeks. And I basically had to write a letter to the Home Office to say, admit this guy. And I wrote, we need him for about 3 weeks, absolutely no more than a month. But he's provided that to the guy and he sent it off. Anyway, when he got here, he showed me his passport. He'd been given indefinite leave to remain.
Yes.
So the bureaucratics, and indefinite leave to remain is incredibly easy to then roll into full British citizenship later on.
After 5 years.
Yeah, after 5 years.
5 years.
So, it's not... a lot of the times it doesn't even come down to having to rely on the law. If the Home Office is in favour, they will just basically let anyone in, and they will upgrade them to the highest possible status that they're able to do, permanent residency.
Well, this is part of the research that I've got on showing the 1.2 million that have come in, is also looking at the asylum decisions. I mean, I waded through, I think it was 237,000 lines of Excel to try and draw it out and pull it into graphs and charts, all the rest of it. I mean, some people were looking at it and said, how have you managed to do this? And hundreds of hours just to pull this together. And one of the interesting aspects I've got is that when you look at indefinite leave to remain, the asylum application process, the ECHR process, are just literally about 15% of all decisions of granting them, maybe 20 in certain areas.
Well, I hear even the guys who come over on small boats, they're getting indefinite leave.
That's enormous. That was Rishi Sunak. He just changed the procedures. But the vast majority of them are getting them on what we call discretionary. Nothing to do with any of them. And that discretionary element is what the government has allowed embedded into the rules and procedures. So these people are not even... they might claim that they've come under asylum, or they might claim European, but they're being granted because there's been a policy shift to say, okay, well, if they look like it's not a bad job and they look a bit okay, they could be hurt or in pain, let them stay. And it's a policy decision.
Yes.
That's one of the ways you want to get rid of it if you want to get immigration matters.
The thing is, it was a Conservative government who did that.
Absolutely.
So, and
we had the gall to say in that report, Labour's been turning a blind eye.
Sadly, it was under Priti Patel, who I thought a lot more would actually occur, because the team that went in with their advisors are good people. But they were defeated, as I've been told, by the civil servants who pushed this through and didn't have Boris's backing.
I mean, the same thing happens every election. The local Conservative comes and knocks on my door, and I, cite the reasons why I'm furious with the Conservative Party, and they always say the same thing, which is, yes, I agree with you, but we're changing now. And it's like Charlie Brown with a football. How many times are we going to let them do this to us? All the Conservative Party ever does is betray us.
And I'm afraid that's what the public is now seeing, and I think they're going to struggle on this. As my end comments. I mean, we got just. I'll whip through these quickly because there's a couple more that I want to look at very interestingly. On the cap on migration, I said is just not workable at the moment, and the format that they've got, it is possible. I did the paper, a fair, flexible, forward-thinking immigration paper straight after Brexit, how we could achieve 50,000 a year and still maintain nurses, doctors and care homes and still have a growing economy on the back of that. So it is possible. It is nice to see them wanting to increase the residency requirement for indefinite leave to remain to 10 years. That would be a good policy. I personally do the full Denmark and say you've got to have a lot longer, and then we can remove it any time. But that's what they've done. Revoke indefinite leave if you become a burden to the UK. Those two are important to kick together if you're really going to have an effective policy. Visa sanctions on uncooperative countries, as I said, that's straight out of Stephen Miller's book in America on there. Again, for some reason I missed up on there. Banning first-cousin marriages from getting visas. They've got to get proof of that, first of all. Again, proof of 2 years of marriage before a visa is granted. Question for me on that is whether that now, if that was to actually come into place, how would it impact people who wanted to get married to someone from a different country across the land? Because one of the things that they also do is powers that they've increased is the fee for your spouse has now also got to be $37,800 a year that they earn, as well as your own.
Oh, so it has to be a matching.
Somehow you've got to have the capital or income to be.
What if you earn 80 grand a year? Can you have a stay-at-home wife from Indonesia then, or
you could do? You could do.
Okay.
I'm not going to go down that line at all.
I picked that one at random.
You randomly pick it out.
Could be an Italian.
Yeah, it could be Italian. Mama would get really upset.
Yes.
You know. So we have that. I'm going to whip through the next one. So I've just said many of the powers are considered put through ones that they've pushed for before. I've linked lots of links there. They've tried to suggest this in their own policies, and they've tried to suggest that they're now doing this as a new thing. And I think it's coming back. You've got to look at their page. This is where they're trying to move to. Rebuilding trust, our new immigration policy.
After we betrayed you
for 14 years and probably a lot longer.
And I think what it started, obviously, this was February 6th. They didn't update from last night, which I thought was fascinating. And then they go down to mention all the things in their bill. And then she has, I'm not sure whether we want to listen to Kemi talking about saying immigration is broken. We will fix it. Jim will fix it.
I mean, I'll just make
Nigel will fix it, if you remember on his.
I mean, to be perfectly blunt, I'll just make the meta point that this we're in a period where immigration is the top issue, and the Conservatives have chosen a first-generation Nigerian immigrant to represent them. I don't think that's necessarily the right optics that are going to succeed for them.
No, I think they're caught in the idea that if you just get somebody of colour to the top of the tree and promote it, then that's all woke and DEI, all the rest of it. Personally speaking, I've met Kemi a few times. I think she's all right. She's a nice enough person.
Yeah, but I have no expectation of being able to move to Nigeria and become the president of Nigeria. It simply wouldn't be acceptable the other way around.
No, I've always had a great belief that unless you're born here, you can't become the leader of the country. I think that works for the United States, and I think it should be perfectly fine here, to be honest as well. But I seem to have an outdated view when it comes to much of politics on that. I think this I'd like you just to listen briefly, if we could. So I've got it on here. We're saying if you commit a crime on our turf, you should be sent back. This is Matt Vickers. First time I've seen Matt Vickers coming out onto. They promoted him.
So what are you proposing, this deportation bill? Tell us what's involved in that and what's that about?
So it's game-changing. We're saying, as we did in office, that if you come to this country illegally, you should be detained and you should be removed. We're saying that anybody who comes to this country should be subject to mandatory age verification, i.e. we should use whatever tech and science we've got to check what age these people are. But more than that, we're saying that if you commit a crime in this country, at the moment, if you commit a crime in this country, you've got to be sentenced to more than a year before you'll be deported. We're saying if you commit a crime on our turf, you should be sent back to wherever you came from. And the big problem with that has been the courts and the Human Rights Act. We're saying we should disapply the Human Rights Act when it comes to cases of deportation, when it comes to cases of immigration. The Human Rights Act shouldn't count. It should be about the law that's created in that place and it being served in the courts properly.
So, I kind of first time I've ever seen Matt come out. Again, he looks like he could be a pretty decent guy. Mm-hmm. Very good at repeating the lines in there. He'd probably do quite well if he moved over to reform in the north of England. In some.
But I don't believe him, and it's not enough.
And but that was the point. I was going to say, look at the demeanour.
Yeah.
Look at the expression of there. There's no enthusiasm in there.
Yeah.
It's like a defeated.
It's like a sigh.
It's
almost.
like, I've got to go out and do this.
Yeah,
we are doing this. Because it's easy to put this type of policy in play when you're in opposition.
The one thing that I am a bit concerned about when on the topic of obviously immigration and proposing a lot of this stuff, there's obviously the man who lurks behind all of this, Tony Blair, that always just seems to be lurking around, proposing things like digital ID.
Yes.
And that's something that really rubs me up the wrong way, because if you implement that kind of policy with digital identification, identifying who's coming into the country, that can only be expanded.
Absolutely.
So we need to have some kind of safety protocols in order to not implement something that could diminish everyone else's freedom.
And I argue this, they're doing that in Europe anyway, it's not stopped them. Europe's a bigger group of countries with a much bigger set of borders, with much more effective IDs for a long period of time.
Yeah.
This is a farce. It's a pretend issue to try and say. It is more of a stalking horse to try and keep us in our boxes and control us in the future when they know things are going to get a lot worse. And the reactions, as you've seen today in your earlier part, is that we're going to get reactions on the streets over Kashmir between India and Pakistani communities. So that is an element of saying, let's get everybody IDs, we can check them. Then we've got your bank accounts, we know we can stop you having any money through digital ID.
That just gets weaponized.
Absolutely.
I've got to the point where I want the policy to be you get deported unless you've got at least one British born grandparent, or you're married to somebody who qualifies. Because, I mean, all of these half measures, and we're going to tinker around with the ECHR, and we're going to change this rule, and we're going to make this allowance 5 years and 10 years. You know, I've been hearing this for decades.
Yeah, we have. And I think there's still some... Given the opportunity to sit down and review where we are now and have a little bit of time to create a sustainable policy for somebody that's in charge, which is why I don't really feel that Reform have got that intellect. That's Nigel Farage telling me right now that he has. But,
just ringing you up, swearing you and hang up again.
Sorry, Nigel. You can do one, mate. Do one. Anyway, so... I'd just love to do that. I probably have actually said to Nigel, do one now. But, if you look at where they are, it's unfortunate that I don't think Reform have got the intellectual capability and capacity at the moment to create these policies. Even when they had something like the other day, which is pretty reasonable, and I'm writing a paper or rather a piece for Lotus Eaters on how we can actually have tented communities legally within the UK. How it's acceptable under the UNHCR and in IOM, how they allow those tented communities for asylum seekers. It's perfectly acceptable. It's also part of European law in many.
Well, other European countries do it.
Obviously,
some of the more eastern ones, they don't put them in 4-star hotels. They just put them in tents.
That's right, and it's
barbed wire around the outside.
It's also part of European Union community policy as well. So I've started to put that out. Why get Andrea to go out and say it and then say what on the telly? We're going to put them in tents. Well, why? Because they're bad people.
Yeah.
Well, because of boom, boom, boom. Get the facts out.
The
people love the facts. When you're watching our channels and programs like that, when we put facts out, they're saying thank you very much, because that enables them to talk about this rationally, sensibly, and not be called racist, xenophobic. They'll still get it, but then you back it with facts. Do that, not Reform. So
Reform doesn't have any quality people because it gets rid of them the moment they display inequality.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's exactly why you're only going to get people who really think that this is a chance for them just to get power if they hang on to the coattails.
It's going to be Nigel Farage and a bunch of yes men and women.
Yeah. So I've got this, and this is the reaction, obviously, by the people. The newspapers were one way. The Conservatives have said this, and this does not go far enough. Asylum system needs to be binned and completely rewritten. All international treaties and conventions that compel us to enter SOB stories need to go. And I do believe that. And actually, to be fair, I've recently heard some Labour MPs talking about the need to reform the ECHR and reform the UN Convention on Refugees because it's no longer fit for purpose. I believe that's the starting point, one of the 3 key tiers that a government has to deal with immigration. And Stephen Miller in the US is now looking at how they can affect UN convention rules, because obviously they don't have the ECHR, but they do have UN convention rules on asylum, and how we can look at international law first, national law second, deportations and deterrence third. And I think finally, I was going to say, when you look at the way that we've done it, look at the way that you'll hear in the USA, they talk about Trump announces a self-deportation plan for illegals. You're given a plane ticket on a commercial flight as 1,000 stipend if you voluntarily leave. But if you're here illegally, self-deportation is best, safest, and most cost-effective way to leave the United States to avoid arrest. He's opening up all these different prisons across the United States because he is going to arrest you if you're illegal and put you in.
Yeah.
And you've got a message, take your grand and go. That is a policy that has ended up alongside the closing of the borders, where you had 200 to 350,000 people coming over a month, down to 6,000 in 3 months, and all of them were detained and deported. End of the border crisis.
So it's entirely a function.
All about
Will, policies and procedures to protect yourself against the blob that will want to try and fight back, and then using all your skilled individuals, to be able to communicate that and effectuate that.
Well, the vast difference between Trump and Farage is that Trump builds a team of talent around him.
Absolutely. And Stephen Miller was there working when I first met him in 2014 at CPAC. Very important place to be if you really want to build where the ideas are coming from in the United States. And I met him first there along with Barry Bennett, and their immigration plans were being created then. Were not able to do it in the first term. Just carried on. He just trusted Stephen to do it. Worked with a bunch of others. Took a while, but they went through every legal area. They looked at the potential fightbacks that could come. A true strategy involves doing that. So there we are. Conservatives, if you really want to win, do as you say when you're in power, not when you're out, and actually have a plan that is genuine and works.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.